Shout out to G-Man Boxing. Where's the piss bottles? No, that's piss. No, that's ridiculous.
Alright, people. Fight week is this week. Joseph Parker versus Joe Joyce. This came around fairly quick, didn't it? You know, it was April the 20. It was sometime in April. I can't remember the actual date when Fury fought White. But obviously, Frank Warren had both guys around the table and said it was more or less done. And it happens in September. Look, we have this fight now. It's on BT Sport pay-per-view. It was set to go up against Lara versus Wood. Lee Wood versus Mauricio Lara. But now it's going up against Kid Galahad, Maxi Hughes. No offense to both guys, but that doesn't exactly pull at the heartstrings the way Wood versus Lara does. So I can't imagine they're going to be losing sleep over going up against that. But nevertheless, look, we got to talk about this fight. So, Joe Parker versus Joe Joyce. Now, I'll say this out straight. If Kevin Barry was still training Joe Joyce, if Kevin Barry's still training Joe Parker, I'd pick Joe Joyce hand over fist. However, I do like what Joseph Parker has been looking under Andy Lee. We look at the first fight he had with Derek Chisora and we say, oh Jesus, he didn't look particularly good under Andy Lee. He looked worse almost. Very close fight. He was down in the first round. But at the end of the day, you have to look at that in context. I mean, Joseph Parker had just fought Junior Fa in February, the back end of February I think it was, and he boarded the plane a week or so later to fly to the UK to settle down with Andy Lee and train with him. So that was his first training camp with Andy Lee. So he had essentially 2 months, basically, maybe less, to work with Andy Lee and to ingratiate himself into Andy Lee. It's not enough time, and it could tell. But then he escaped with the win, split decision win. He escaped with the win, and then he had the rematch with him in December. Now, personally, for me, I felt that Joseph Parker looked a hell of a lot better in the rematch than he did in the first fight. However, he still lacked the killer instinct. He put Chisora down a few times. He had a knackered guy in front of him who was just leaning up against the ropes, but he still lacked the killer instinct, and he let Chisora win a couple of rounds in that rematch. So Parker is still lacking that. And I've said this once, I'll say it again. Joseph Parker, to me, is a very annoying heavyweight. Not in a sense of his personality or anything like that, but as a boxing, I'm going to say analyst, but I'm not officially an analyst, just a boxing YouTuber, but let's just say analyst. As someone who likes to analyse the sport and look for what I want in fighters, Joseph Parker has all the talent you'd want in a heavyweight. He takes a shot reasonably well. He has fast hands. He has decent explosive power, good boxing ability. He has a little bit of everything. He's a little bit of everything, but he lacks that killer instinct. And without that, that's what you need in this sport, especially in a division like the heavyweight division. It's kill or be killed. It really is. So him lacking that is a worry. He did seem to have a little bit more dog with Andy Lee in the Chisora rematch, but saying that, he still let Chisora. I put it to you like this. If Dylan White was in that situation, if Joe Joyce was in that situation with Derek Chisora, do you think that Derek Chisora would have seen the final bell? I don't think he would have. I really don't. I don't think he would have. I think he would have been stopped by Joe Joyce, because Joe Joyce has that killer instinct. He has that meanness in him, and he's got absolute sandbags in his fists. So that's what we're dealing with Parker. Now with Joe Joyce got the win over Daniel Dubois in 2020. He looked good doing it. But then he had a fight against Carlos Takam where he got clipped a bit, but he did end up taking Takam out. And then recently he had a fight with Christian Hammer. The fight that was at. And again, he had moments where he was clipped. I think that Joe Joyce is a fighter who, he relies a lot on his chin, definitely. But when he knows an opponent really doesn't give him any kind of threat, he does be a bit lackadaisical with his defense. And I think that with Joe Joyce, I keep getting the Joes mixed up. With Joe Joyce, I feel as though if he knows an opponent doesn't really have that much punching power, or I can kind of telegraph the shots, I can see them coming, he'd sooner. I don't want to say it like he does this. It isn't this what he thinks, but I'm sure he probably looks and thinks, okay, look, if he hits me, he hits me. I know what I'm going to get. I know I can take it, and I'll be okay. If he's got really good power, like Daniel Dubois, all right, we'll be a bit more careful then, because I think that he can tailor his defense with the opponent. I think that if the opponent is dangerous enough and he has real power, he's not going to be as lackadaisical with his defense and just go marching forward. You know, it's an interesting fight. This, I fully think that Joe Parker is going to come and look to establish a jab and just try and walk Joe Joyce onto something. I think that's what he's going to do. I think he's going to go and look to counter Joe Joyce as he comes in. You know, Joe Joyce may come forward in this fight, and if he does, I suspect Parker will look quite explosive and quite good, quite eye-catching early on, because Joe Joyce is going to give Parker loads of opportunity to let them combinations go, let them fast shots go. However, I think that at some point, I think Joe Joyce is going to be wary of what Parker's coming back with, because Parker has punching power. He might not be the most devastating puncher in the world, but he's definitely got power there, respectable power anyway. I think that Joe Joyce is going to be cognizant of that, and I think he's going to make sure to have his defense and have his defensive wits about him. But I think what he's going to try and do is going to try and back Joseph Parker up to the ropes as much as he can. He's going to try and hit Joseph Parker wherever he can to head to body, and I think that he's going to try and do what Dillian Whyte did and just make Parker feel uncomfy in there. You know, as I said, with Andy Lee, he did show a little bit more tenacity in the Chisora rematch, but at the same time he lacked that killer instinct. And I think that if you put him in a position where he's really up against it, or if he's got an opponent really trying to force him back and push it on him, I can see him a bit like what he did in the Dillian Whyte fight, mentally capitulating a bit. I can see that happening. Now with Joseph Parker, he's going to want to look at the blueprint that Brian Jennings did when he was in there with Joe Joyce, which is what he was moving. He was trying to just counter Joe Joyce with little pitter-patter shots, and he was going to Joe Joyce's body, and he hurt Joe Joyce to the body. I think it was in the 5th round in their fight. Now Joseph Parker can switch it up to head and body. He's dropped plenty of people with body shots. So I think if there's a weakness with Joe Joyce that's there, and if you can't get to him with the head, if you can get to him with the body, it would be worth launching attacks to Joe Joyce's body. I really do think it would, and I think that someone with fast hands could really bother Joe Joyce, because if you look at some of the people he's fought, none of them have really had fast hands. You know, Dubois' hands aren't the quickest. He's very robotic in the way he fights, very telegraph his shots. Takam doesn't have the quickest hands. Hammer certainly doesn't. Stavern, no. Someone with really, really fast hands could really trouble Joe Joyce. If Joe Joyce comes out there and he starts jabbing, well, I would be saying, I'd be looking to try and get underneath that jab. I wouldn't be trying, if I was Joseph Parker, if I was Andy Lee, saying to jab with him. I'd be trying to move my head and get underneath that jab and get in close and let the combinations go, let the hooks and the uppercuts go on the inside. I think that if you could do that, you're going to have great success with Joseph Parker, or with Joe Joyce, if you're Joseph Parker. So I can see a situation where both guys can use their strengths to really put the other guy off. I could see Joe Joyce using his physical strength to push Joe Parker back, manhandle him, and really make him feel uncomfy in there. But I can see if Joseph Parker can actually get underneath that jab of Joe Joyce, if Joe Joyce decides to employ the jab, then he may have some success letting his combinations go. I think that could be very, very interesting with the head movement. If Parker can move his head, get underneath that jab, and let those combinations go, we could have a very, very interesting fight on our hands. Saying that as well, I think that Joe Parker would be foolish if he doesn't target the body of Joe Joyce. Joe Joyce has a great stamina tank, and I think his body would hold up, but you never know. If Brian Jennings can hurt him to the body, I've no doubt that Joe Joyce can as well. With Joe Joyce, again, I think his main plan is going to be effective pressure, but smart and effective pressure, to really try and get Parker out of his comfort zone. Essentially what Dillian Whyte did. If you look at the first 2 rounds, I know the headbutt didn't help, but if you look at the first round specifically against Joe Parker, the movement of Parker and the boxing was, you could tell instantly there was a speed gap, there was a skill gap between the two. But Dillian Whyte just stopped Parker in his tracks from boxing. He just stopped him. He just roughed him up. He let some shots go. He hit Joseph Parker wherever he needed to hit him. He made him feel uncomfy. I think that Joe Joyce needs to do something similar. I think he's going to try and back Joseph Parker up against the ropes. I think he's going to try and open up some combinations on him. And I think he's just going to try and hurt Joseph Parker, make him feel uncomfy, and just make Joseph Parker maybe even reluctant to throw. Maybe even have Joseph Parker go into his shell and just turn mover and just look to move around the ring and not engage Joe Joyce, because he feels this guy hits too hard and I'm not comfy in there. I think that could happen with Joe Joyce as well. I could think he could do something like that. Joe Joyce is deceiving. He will deceive you with how he looks in the ring. He really will. He will deceive you. He looks so clunky and novice-y, but there's a lot of talent there with Joe Joyce. There is, and that has been effective through the years. It's got him an Olympic silver medal. Many believe he should have won the gold. So that's what I think both guys need to do. I think Joe Parker will be well advised to go to Joe Joyce's body and try and get underneath the jab of Joe Joyce if he implies it, and start using his combinations, hooks and uppercuts. If he's ever in a situation where he's backed up against the ropes, he's going to need to try and just, as soon as he feels if he feels his foot even grazing that rope, he's going to want to move and get out of there. Do not let yourself get backed up against the ropes if you're Joseph Parker. Move, get out of dodge, move around the ring, and try and take center ring again, and try and not let him bully you in there and push you back and set a tempo that you're not comfy with. Where if you're a Joe Joyce, that's exactly what you're going to do. You're going to want to push him back, set a tempo, see how the jab works. If he's not getting underneath it, then use the jab, keep him at bay, and just hit him wherever. I have to give a pick on this. As I said, if Joe Joyce or Parker was with Kevin Barry still, Joe Joyce every day of the week. With Andy Lee now, it's very different. Very, very different. But I got to give a pick on this, and I'm going to go with a points decision victory for Joe Joyce on points. I think he'll take him. I think he'll outwork him and take him on points. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. I hope you enjoyed the video, people. Smash the like button if you could. Subscribe if you haven't already. For now, lads and lasses, I'll talk to you. Peace.